So, following the silver era of the Disney animated canon, well, to be honest, this bit actually happened at the tail end of the silver era. Walt Disney passed away during the making of The Jungle Book. It was the first film released after his passing, and the last film released with his direct involvement. And as you may expect from a company named after the founder, this caused a lot of internal problems creatively. And that really wasn't great for the company, as you can tell from the fact that the following era is often referred to as the Dark Era. A lot of people who, I don't want to be mean when I call them Disney apologists. Maybe I should just call them Disney adults. That seems to be a pretty accepted mean term. Like to call it the Bronze Age. But the failure of a lot of these films really, to me, says that Bronze Age is being way too nice. Bronze Era, or Age, I guess. I think Dark Era really is the best way to refer to it as. This was not even like the first era that produced mostly stinkers. I mean, there was the package film era, or the wartime era, as some people call it, which, wasn't exactly the most financially stable either, but America had literally joined a war, and the company was constructed to make films to help improve our relationship with Brazil and South America as a whole, just so they didn't join the Axis powers. So, a little excusable that those films are a little, isn't South America great? Because, yeah, South America is great. Please don't leave the Allied powers. And then the films that aren't related to the war lost a lot of their budget and their animators to the draft. The Dark Era, though, is entirely, uh-oh, our company leader is gone. Where do we go from here? And that's what I'll be looking at, is the 8 films in the Disney Dark Era. Which, looking at it years-wise, is also one of the longest. The first film comes out in 1970, and the 8th film comes out in 1988. That is 18 years of hardship. Put it this way. The Renaissance era, their most beloved one, the one that was the most financially successful for them, the one that really put them on the map, that was 10 years. And most of the eras are around 10 years. The Dark Era is exceedingly long. Despite, it has less films than the Experimental Era, but it was a longer period of time. Before we get on it, I'm going to do some quick housekeeping. I normally do the intro in front of the camera, without even writing anything, just go talk. I don't like acting very much. I mention it all the time. I prefer improvising, so here I am. But normally I do voiceovers for the rest of it. Sometimes with a script, sometimes just my opinions, my color commentaries. And also, sorry, the windows are open, so birds and cars, you're just going to hear them. I'm using a laptop now to edit and all that stuff, and it is not easy. That laptop does not like editing, but it would be a hassle to unbox my old PC that is dying anyway. Like, it's a necessity that I'm using that laptop. And that laptop does not understand how to record audio very well. My old editing software for audio that came with it doesn't really want to work anymore. There's no disk drive on the laptop. I can't just put the old disc in. I had to take the files on a thumb drive and move it over. And that worked for everything but the audio. And so I tried Audacity. And the last time I tried Audacity was about 10 years ago. And I never liked Audacity because there's this really bad tinny sound that I picked up. And I never liked it for that. It is 10 years later and that sound is still there. Don't use Audacity. And stop excusing Audacity like, yeah, for free, it's pretty good. It sounds terrible, and it crashes all the time. It's unforgivably bad. Like, it's free for a reason. I tried it briefly. I did it for a resume, and I regret using it for the resume because my audio does not sound very good. And not only that, it could not capture audio in the right ear chamber. Like, the bar would be like this big, while the left one would be like, here. OBS seemed to be a bit better at it, so I'm not entirely sure my mic is dying or anything, but I don't really love the way OBS captures audio either. It's better than Audacity, but it has its problems. So I'm just going to be recording the whole thing on camera with the mic, which, I'm probably going to have to tune the audio up a bit anyway, even though I have the bass up to full, but at least it won't be super tinny, and I can usually hide it pretty well with music, and even when I don't, it's not nearly as bad as Audacity's tinny sound. I decided to watch the Dark Era out of order, just because I've seen them all before. Some not in a very long time, but I'd seen them all before, so there were no real surprises here. I decided to just watch them in this order. Why? And yeah, I did save the Aristocats for last. Because the Aristocats is interesting.
Coming to home video for the very first time. One of the greatest Disney classics, the Aristocats.
Meow.
It is still like one of the most dogged on Disney films. It is the one that that's when they dropped in quality. And if you read reviews from the time, they thought that too. Reviewers were actually, critics I guess, no one called them reviewers then, but critics were like, wow, what happened to the Walt Disney Company? They made family films, and now they're making films exclusively for children, if the Aristocats is anything to go by. And watching the Aristocats back, oh yeah. I watched it last just so I didn't actually want to be that harsh on it. I wanted to see what the actual competition was, I felt if I went to that one first, I'd probably just be really angry at it and then just regret being angry later after I watched the other ones. Because, yeah, the Aristocats is not nearly the worst of those films, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it is a 2 out of 5. It's not good. What I really didn't like about the Aristocats is... Wow, that's a very loud car. What I didn't like about the Aristocats is it's a bit too kiddie, but a lot of it I couldn't help but excuse because at least it knew its audience, sort of. And you know what? I like the songs in this movie a lot. Not, believe it or not, so much Everybody Wants to Be a Cat. I've heard that song too many times that its novelty has worn out on me, I'm just being honest with you. But Scales and Arpeggios, I really like that song. I don't know why, I just really do. It gets stuck in my head occasionally, even well before I rewatched this. It's one of those random thought songs, You're just sitting there working on something and then... It's so stuck all the time. It's the characters, though, that I really don't like. I feel Duchess and the kittens are really underdeveloped. I feel Thomas O'Malley has something there, and him being voiced by Phil Harris, one of the 87 characters Phil Harris voiced for Disney. There's something there. But wow, this was the weakest performance Phil Harris ever gave. No, the weakest character he ever had to play. Because there's nothing there. And I can tell what was supposed to be there. There's a lot of lines where Duchess is like, oh, well, I'm sure he's not going to help us. He's a stray and a bachelor. He's not going to help children. And that makes sense. That's actually not a bad character at all. And it shows where character development can come in. He warms up to them. The problem is he warms up to them in a minute. Because, he meets Duchess, and he starts hitting on her, and she starts using it to her advantage. She's like, oh, he can help us out. I just won't tell him I have kids. And then the kids show up anyway, and he's like, oh, you have kids. All right, anyway, I'm going to help you out. Where's the character development you promised? Because it just happens. It makes it so there's a really cheap moment where she turns him down because, oh, it will never work. I mean, I have kids and you're not used to that. And I'm watching the whole movie and I'm like, he really likes the kids already. He's already acting like their father. Look, what draft of the script made it to the final cut? And then there's Edgar, who is often one of the least liked Disney villains ever, just because people think he has a point. And the thing is, people have argued, well, hold on, he doesn't really have a point. Like, he's like, oh, the cats have 9 lives, so I'll be having this forever. And then also, they're just cats. He'll basically have the fortune. Here's the thing. Watch the movie before you say that second bit. Because genuinely, the cats are fully sapient, and the humans seem to know this at times. Like, it's not done very well. But considering there's like a dance party at the end where the rich baroness is like, oh, they just invited all their cat friends and we're gonna have a cat house. No. Edgar still has a point. He would be waiting on these cats' hands and feet as the cats tell him what to do. And I also can't stand their owner for this. Like, this is disgusting. This is like, oh, my cats deserve my house and my fortune, and Edgar must still be their butler. Edgar is the villain of the movie. Like, he does horrible things, and they could tell they were afraid he'd be sympathetic because he starts gloating like a villain, like not long after he thinks he's killed the cats. It's just bad. This movie is not unwatchable. It is not horrible. It's not even that bad. But the Aristocats is bad. It's a very overly kiddie-friendly movie with really kiddie-friendly jokes that just aren't all that funny. And the characters are not developed well enough to redeem any of that. I don't like it. There are people who still love the movie, like, and a lot of them are nostalgia blind, but so what? There are worse movies to be nostalgia blind to. If you love the Aristocats, great. I'm sure you're not sick of Everybody Loves to Be a Cat, Wants to Be a Cat. And again, I like Scales and Arpeggios a lot. And I'm a sucker for the scratchy kind of art style. I mean, there's a reason why the artwork I tend to use that I draw myself, that's sketchy for a reason. I like the dark era art style. I really do. I'm super fond of it. I wish I could be using it more in this video, but there's no voiceover. Oh well. It's not horrible, but it ain't a good movie. Like, show it to your kids and they'll think it's fun, but they'll probably grow out of it.
Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest.
Ever wonder what the real truth is behind the legend of Robin Hood? Well, here are the characters brought to life in classic Disney style to live it all again.
Well, greetings.
And call off Christmas.
So when I was looking up the list of films to remember which the correct order is, I remember being surprised, like, wow, Robin Hood is the second film. So I guess they picked up after that. And that's true, but I really wish it was more true. Robin Hood is still pretty beloved for the Dark Era. It is probably one of the most beloved Dark Era films. Now, as I told you in the last video, in the Experimental Era, one of the Dark Era films is actually my second favorite Disney film of all time. There's a lot of cult classics in the Dark Era. There's a reason some people call it the Bronze Era, even the people that aren't, Disney adults. There's a lot of cult classics in this era. And I understand, like, all the ones that are cult classics and the reasons why they are cult classics. Such as Robin Hood. It's a fun adventure film. We don't get those too often anymore. It's a pretty strong adaptation of Robin Hood. It's like a 6 out of 10. It's like a 3 out of 5. I love the opening of this film. Like, all of it. The storybook opening, the whistling. I love it. I love the opening. And, like, all of it, the song, the Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, the arrows being shot at them as they're easily evading them, and then them robbing the carriage of Prince John. It's such a good intro for Prince John, too. Like, as a character who's not going to be that intimidating as a villain and is mostly going to be a joke, that opening works for him so well. And then the film is like, and now we're going to introduce you to all the children in the movie, and it nosedives. Man, if you are on the fence about having kids, check out Disney's Robin Hood, because that will help you decide if you want kids. Because if you can't stand these kids, you probably shouldn't have kids. They actually did make me mad. Because there's still really good scenes after, like the archery tournament. That's always great. That's a highlight of the film, and that's a highlight of the Robin Hood story in general. And I dare say the Disney one's one of the better versions of it still. And the songs are still good, and the characters are still fun, other than the kids that are really kind of annoying sometimes. Even sometimes. Not even the worst thing ever. But Robin Hood cannot shake the feeling of being a diet Silver Era film. And I love the Silver Era, as I went over. It is still my favorite one. I've now rewatched quite a few of the Renaissance Era films, and you can see where I rank them, how high I rank some of those. I still think the Silver Era is my favorite one, hands down. So a diet Silver Era film is a movie I'm watching where I'm like, I want to love this. This has so much of what I love about classic Disney, but then so many pitfalls and stumbles that it's kind of boring or kind of not funny. It's a movie I wish I loved, and a movie I wish was great. At the end of the day, it's solid. It's fun. It's good. Show this one to your kids, and I don't think they'll grow out of it nearly as quickly. I still like the movie. But it was better as a memory than it was as a rewatch. Film number 3 is an interesting case. The many adventures of Winnie the Pooh did technically have Walt Disney's involvement because it's a repackage of a bunch of Winnie the Pooh short films. They were already strapped for cash on film 3. And it's considered by many people to be like still just one of the best Winnie the Pooh movies ever. And I love Winnie the Pooh. I haven't had a chance to mention it because he just has not come up yet. I love Winnie the Pooh. I don't love the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Like, it's another 3 out of 5 film, but I liked Robin Hood more. It's like, I watched them the same day. I watched Winnie the Pooh after. I don't remember which one I watched first, but after I watched both, I remember being like, yeah, Robin Hood is definitely a better film than Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. I don't dislike the movie or anything. Like, there's still a lot of cute moments. It's a lot of fun. It feels so jarringly, like, puzzle pieced together. I'm sorry, I noticed it. Not to spoil my opinion, but the 2011 Winnie the Pooh film purposefully has a similar vibe to it of, oh, these are a bunch of little stories all pasted together. But because it was written with that intention, it flows so much better. And that movie is also just a love letter to everything that worked with Winnie the Pooh before. And I gotta say, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is the iconic introduction of Disney's Winnie the Pooh, you know? Because while the shorts came up beforehand, this feels like the first time. It's just, it feels a bit more jarring how together they are. And it's still fun. Like, there's still a lot of great jokes. Like, Gopher walking back and falling into his own hole. That's always fun. Pooh getting stuck because he ate too much of Rabbit's honey. That's still fun. Tigger's introduction. That's still fun. The rain, rain, rain came down, down, down. And that was a blast. I have fun with this. But then I'm also wondering, why weren't some of the other shorts put in this? Like, is the Pooh Sticks short not before this movie? Because that should have been in there. What about Eeyore's birthday? Why isn't that one in here? Again, maybe I just don't know, and those came out after the film. That's totally fine if that's the case. But if they came out before, oh, they probably should have put those in there. Because I remember those shorts growing up with them, and they're good. Why isn't Pooh Sticks in this? As a huge Winnie the Pooh fan, even though, again, sorry I've never mentioned it, I like most Winnie the Pooh movies more than this. Maybe I'll be wrong when I rewatch them, but I'm pretty sure this is like the lower end of Winnie the Pooh for me. And I seem to be in the minority. A lot of people think this is like the best Winnie the Pooh movie, but no. Like, it's better than the Heffalump movie, but I can't even think of what else it's better than off the top of my head. It's fun. It's a 3 out of 5. It's Winnie the Pooh. It's hard to not watch Winnie the Pooh without a big old smile on your face. But for as iconic as these shorts are, maybe they were better off as shorts, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Meet Orville the Albatross, Bernard and Bianca the secret agents, Penny the desperate, outrageous Madame Medusa,
I've got to have the devil's eye.
Mayday!
the Rescuers, this summer in theaters everywhere.
So now we have one of the biggest moneymakers of the Dark Era. I mentioned this before, but classic Disney did not make all that much money. Like, Snow White was a huge flash-in-the-pan success, and then Pinocchio didn't earn its money back. And neither did Fantasia. I think Dumbo did, but I don't even know if Bambi did. And so going to the Dark Era, there was already a problem. Knowing that, hey, we don't always make our money back. In fact, it was probably most of the time they didn't. They already had the theme park by then, so it's not like they were necessarily hemorrhaging money, but it was already a problem for the animation side of it. But thankfully for them, the fourth film was a moneymaker. The Rescuers, based off of a series of books. And this is definitely one of the biggest cult classics of the Dark Era. People love the atmosphere of this movie and the tone of this movie. And I understand. It's a bit bleak. It's very somber. It's slow and it's quiet, and I can appreciate all those kind of things. Again, I love the Silver Era. The Silver Era could be very atmospheric and quiet, and that's why I loved it. And that's why it pains me, way more than it pains any of you, that I can't stand this movie. It's unfortunate, because when it comes to the bleak tone and the somber atmosphere, I want to appreciate it so much. And I even like Bernard and Bianca. I actually think they're pretty great characters. I don't like the rest of the characters of the movie. Like, the sidekicks are dumb. The villain is dumb. I mean, the little girl's fine. She's certainly not one of the Robin Hood kids. She's fine. She's whatever. But Bernard and Bianca are like the reason to watch this movie, as far as I'm concerned. And I just don't like it. The one thing I can say is easy and negative. I hate the humor of this movie. For the most bit. The unlucky 13 jokes, that's funny. Those are funny. And they're Bernard's character. So that helps tie it in. Again, I really like them so much. I like... Bernard is a coward, but a nice man at heart. So he cares about other people more than he cares about the safety of himself, even though he's a gigantic coward. And Bianca sees through that immediately. Like, their introduction is, she sees him singing along as a janitor. He's not even in the Rescuers Society. Singing along to the anthem anyway. And is the only one who objects to her going on the mission. And not for any, like, chauvinistic reasons either. He just thinks the mission's dangerous. And that perks her up and she wants him to come with her. I love all of that. I love that so much. I love the opening song in the movie too, but then I tune out immediately. Like, the slapstick is awful. And the fact that, here's a mild spoiler, the villain is defeated with slapstick, and it doesn't sit right with me. I hate it. This kind of movie doesn't need slapstick. I like slapstick, but slapstick does not belong in a somber, bleak story in the swamp. This was one of the least fun I had watching any of these movies again. And I didn't even like it the first time I watched it, and that wasn't even until a few years ago. But I liked it less this time, and I'm sorry. It's another Meet the Robinsons where I get why this is a cult classic to so many people. Because even people who love it admit they're not perfect films, that they have problems, but what they're going for, they super appreciate and think they're standouts for the Disney catalog. And I agree with that sentiment, despite hating both those films. And it's funny, I don't like the comedy in either, and that's why I don't like the lol-so random humor of Meet the Robinsons, which I feel undermines the characters and the rest of the atmosphere and tone of the movie. The Rescuers, the slapstick is awful, but also the rest of the tone of the movie is boring. And that stinks. I like films like this, and I was bored to tears by it both times I've sat through it. And that's a shame. I should love this movie. Like Meet the Robinsons, I don't feel bad for not liking that one. Like on the inside, you know? I'm like, whatever, I appreciate its messaging, but I hate the film. This one, it's like, no, I should appreciate this film. Why don't I? Why is this one of my least favorite Disney films? I really can't stand it. And it's a shame because it's got a lot of things I should really like. But I don't like The Rescuers. Its saving grace is that it's not a half a star. Like, this is a 1 out of 5 for me, and I'm sorry. Anyone who says this is a 5 out of 5, I understand and I wish I was you. Because it should be my type of movie. But I don't like it. When it comes to somber animated films, I'll stick with When the Wind Blows and The Plague Dogs. Not The Rescuers. Oh, actually, when it comes to somber Disney films, I could also just stick with The Fox and the Hound. This is the new current benchmark for very flawed film that is somehow still a 4-star ranking. The Fox and the Hound really was something very different. And even though it followed The Rescuers, its very bittersweet tone. The bitter is outright bleak sometimes. It's a painful film at times. And I love how they were willing to do that. That said, apparently some of the lighter-hearted stuff was always intended. Like, apparently Todd's mother being implied to be shot, they wanted to, like, make it clear she dies in the beginning, but the studio was like, no, we can't do that. But apparently, Chief surviving being hit by the train was always intended. My reason for this is, I mentioned him before, but the channel Colin Looks Back, he interviewed the director, and the director said, no, that was always planned. Like, early on, we were like, no, Chief should survive. And I'm sorry, that was a bad call. Because Chief should have died. It would have raised the stakes better. It would have made this, I don't think it would have made the film like 4.5 or 5 stars or anything, but it would have fixed some of the problems that made it a low-hanging 4. Especially because it's not even funny after. Like, him whimpering about the broken leg is like, oh, wow, he's milking this. And then the character's like, Chief, you're milking it. I'll break your other leg. And it's like, if you don't even care, then why do you hate this fox so much? If you're kind of like, whatever. It's a movie with no real villain, because you understand where every side's coming from, other than that bear that shows up. It is so hard to talk about this movie. This is the only one I can say, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just watch the movie. It is so non-traditional Disney. It still feels Disney, like, okay, the comedy isn't great. Slapstick is back in a movie it doesn't belong in once again. Wow, why do we keep doing this? But it's not as unfunny. Like, I don't know, I kind of like the caterpillar stuff. It's not great, but I kind of like it. And plus, the woodpecker is Tigger. That's a bit better.
Is this it, Boomer?
Oh, sure, Dickie. This is the place. I never forget a tree. I never forget a tree.
Part of me's rushing through these because the battery level on this camera has always been terrible, but also, I got nothing to say other than this is like a flawed, near masterpiece kind of film. There are movies I like better that I wouldn't go as far to say masterpiece, and yet, this one feels like it's on the cusp of masterpiece so often. tone and its pacing ruins itself a few times, but what it's going for is wonderful. Like, if you have never heard bittersweet Disney film before, The Fox and the Hound will be revolutionary to you. It is astounding what this film accomplishes. It's still only a 4 out of 5, but it is probably a film there are some films I say 4 out of 5. I appreciate it more than I like it. And this film is sort of that, even though I really, really love this film. It's a little bit equal in how much I appreciate it and love it, even though, realistically, maybe I do still appreciate it more than I love it, even though I do love it a lot.
The Walt Disney Company is proud to announce one of its greatest adventures ever is coming to video for the very first time.
The Black Cauldron can never be destroyed. Hurry!
Coming this fall, only for a limited time.
History lesson. Or maybe confirmation of history lesson. The Black Cauldron is the Disney film that almost killed the animation department for the company. I've heard that fact several times. You've heard that fact maybe yourself several times. And isn't it funny how it actually is true? But it's only the first half of the story. Actually, the second half of the story. I mentioned the first half a little bit ago. Disney was usually hemorrhaging money on these animated films. It's just that Black Cauldron really lost a lot of money and was critically panned. But why did Black Cauldron even exist? Well, I'm going to pull up the year again. When did the Black Cauldron come out? 1985. Do you want to know some other animated films that came out before or even around the same time? Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings. Ralph Bakshi's Wizards. Don Bluth's The Secret of Nim. Rankin Bass's The Last Unicorn. Heck, Heavy Metal, I'm pretty sure, either came out a little after or a little before. Studios were under the impression, the correct impression from what I understand too, that audiences really wanted dark fantasy films out of animation. And that's the thing. When I first watched The Black Cauldron, it was a long time ago. I was still in high school. And I was a bit of an edgy teen, believe it or not. So I really liked it. Then I got a bit older, and I became more aware of those other films, and I was like, oh, this is just a copycat. And I just had no respect for the film anymore. These days, I've definitely mellowed on both of those. Knowing the state Disney was in and for how long they were in, it is completely forgivable that they just had to chase a trend. I mean it. The Black Cauldron was them chasing a trend. It was, oh, well, we'll make our own Wizards. We'll make our own Secret of Nim. We'll make our own Last Unicorn. Yeah, this is based off of book 2. This is based off of the Chronicles Prydain? Is that how it's pronounced? Please tell me in the comments if it's not Prydain, if it's Prydain or whatever. I also still don't love the film. But I'm gonna be honest, there are bits of the Black Cauldron, going back to it, that are pretty freaking good. When the movie puts all the Disney-isms aside and tries to be a dark fantasy film, it's weirdly intense, its pacing is near perfect, it's actually pretty good in those scenes. And some of the characters aren't even bad either. Like, Gurgi is awful, and then he develops as a character and became like in the middle of where I ranked all the characters. I couldn't believe it. Gurgi, that Munches and Crunches guy, is in the middle? I tolerated him? What? And the main character, who's Taran. Tarin, I like his character growth. He's a jerk. He sees himself as this great, all-becoming hero who's just got to prove himself. And then reality strikes, and he's a weakling compared to the Dark King. That's not his name. And all the bad guys and all the threats. And he realizes, I suck, actually. I'm not a hero. Heroes are heroic, and I'm not that. And so he becomes it by the end. I like that so much, and that fits a dark fantasy, because a lot of dark fantasies were, like, experimental and subversive. So yeah, your hero shouldn't be a hero. He should suck. Like, all that's good. But then Jeffrey Katzenberg had to cut footage. And I don't think he's responsible for, like, the kiddie stuff, like the pretty juvenile jokes, that stupid village with the pixies. I don't think he's responsible for that. But he did cut out a lot of stuff that was a lot more intense. And oh my god, the Black Cauldron needed a PG-13 rating. It was 85. PG-13 existed, and that was the problem. Disney was afraid, I did hear about this, Disney was afraid of getting a PG-13 rating. But that's the rating the movie needed to get. Like, if PG-13 hadn't existed before this movie, then it probably would have turned out better, because they would have said, we won't get an R rating, we'll get a PG rating, we can do whatever we want. Did you see Wizards? There's nipples in Wizards. We'll get away with anything. But no, there was a PG-13 and they were scared. They wanted a movie to market towards teenagers, but they were afraid of the rating that you give to films for teenagers. And that shows how out of their depth they were. They needed this movie. They really did. And there are times they clearly understood the assignment. But it's still like a 2 out of 5. It's still not a good movie, but for all the 2 out of 5s I'm going to give Disney's entire catalog, it's one of the best ones. I don't like the movie, but I kind of came close to liking the movie sometimes. I do like some of the bits of the movie. I even really like some of the bits of the movie. When it gets intense, you feel it. That stuff's kind of very good. I won't say great, but kind of very good. But boy, did it need to understand itself way more often. Because they would have had a classic here. And again, anyone who says, nah, Black Cauldron, Disney masterpiece, cult classic. I guess part of the back of my brain does go, do you only watch Disney films? Because at the same time, though, to be nice about it, if you love the Black Cauldron, but you just don't experiment outside of Disney, The Last Unicorn is probably secretly one of your favorite films. And you don't know that yet. Check out The Lord of the Rings. It's flawed, but weirdly endearing. And Wizards is very strange. So maybe watch Fire and Ice instead. Maybe you'll love heavy metal. There's a treasure trove of animated dark fantasies that you'll probably love. If you've never gone around to see them, but you love the Black Cauldron. As it stands, I see so much potential in the Black Cauldron. And everyone says this, let's not give Disney any ideas. Let's stop telling them to remake stuff in live action. But here's my massive exception. I would love a Black Cauldron live action film. I bet that would be good. Because Disney is no longer afraid of the PG-13 rating. And that's what Black Cauldron desperately needed. You want to do that in live action? Or just remake it in like CG or hands drawn, but they don't do that anymore. And make it PG-13 this time, I think that would be very good. I don't know. It's a movie I want to like because it really does prove itself sometimes. But most of the time, well, maybe not even most of the time, maybe half of the time, it doesn't. And that's a shame. Because, yeah. I could picture a world where this was a new Disney classic. Instead, it's a cult classic. And not a terrible one, just one I don't really like.
From Walt Disney Home Video, it's adventure.
We've not a moment to lose.
Olivia. To take on Ratigan, the world's biggest rat.
What did you call me?
You're a slimy, contemptible sewer rat.
So out of all the Disney cult classics, How many of you guessed The Great Mouse Detective is my second favorite Disney film? Man, no joke, I liked it even more this time. There is something about the way this movie works where every following scene is better than the last one. This is a fun, boisterous, adventurous film. Is it a little black and white with the characters? Yeah. Professor Ratigan feels more like he came out of a Saturday morning cartoon than he did a classic Disney film. But oh my god, is that the point?
From the brain that brought you the Big Ben caper, the head that made headlines in every newspaper. My earlier crimes were fine for their times, but now that I'm at it again.
It's so much fun! He didn't need to be Rat Moriarty, he needed to be Vincent Price voicing Professor Ratigan as Saturday morning cartoon Disney villain. The songs are great. There are like 4 songs and it's still a fantastic musical. Basil's a great character with some understated but pointed character development. The jokes are so funny. Like, oh my god. He never gets Olivia's name right, even at the end of the movie, even though at that point, he talked to her father and got their last name right. What a wonderful joke that you definitely don't pick up on until you watch it a few times. Like, you get that he misses her name every time, but then you watch it another time, it's like, wait a minute, he said it correct, and he's talking to her dad. And then he messes it up again later. Dr. Dawson, I like him so much too. Olivia's also great. Like, I love how she's basically like a deconstruction of like the Disney sidekicks, because she forcibly tags along, is warned, you're just gonna get yourself in trouble, this is dangerous stuff. She tags along anyway and gets kidnapped twice. And it makes sense. She's just a kid. She's dealing with underworld supercriminals. Of course she's underprepared. They warned her. And it's endearing. I love it. I love this movie so much. It's so funny. Like, is it like the most touching Disney movie ever? Well, the ending gets me every time, but technically no. It's just a 5 out of 5 perfect film because it does everything it wants to. It's funny when it wants to be. It's exciting when it wants to be. It's tearful when it wants to be. It's fun. Sometimes a movie just needs to be fun and excel at being fun. It's a better film for me than Lilo and Stitch. I love The Great Mouse Detective wholeheartedly. It is so good. It was the best Disney film to have ever come out at the time. And the box office proved it. Like, they did not have to shelve the animation side after Great Mouse Detective because it made its money back. Was it as big of a hit as The Rescuers? No, and you can tell because that one got a sequel. But boy, man, I said it before, Disney cult classics are weird for me because I don't like most of them. I'm a cult classics type of person, but I don't like most Disney cult classics. If you couldn't tell from, I don't like The Rescuers, or The Black Cauldron, or The Aristocats, or Meet the Robinsons, or Pete's Dragon. But I love The Great Mouse Detective so much. That is my kind of Disney cult classic. It is my second favorite Disney film. And I liked it even more this time. It went up a few spots in my favorite films list. It's just so enjoyable. Every single time.
Coming soon to own on video cassette.
Join the gang. And add this great classic to your Disney collection. Oliver and Company. Own it on video September 24th.
Oliver and Company was the second film I watched in order. And that's because I was kind of waiting for it, you know? In the Pete's Dragon episode, I actually called it out. I said, everyone knows that movie's boring. I'll get to it when I get to it. That said, in the following years, people have warmed up to it. They think it's like a proto-Renaissance era film. And I wish I understood. I couldn't stand it this time. I actually thought Oliver and Company was awful when I rewatched it. It's got a lot of the same problems. The comedy's not funny, and oh my god, there's a lot more like kind of racist jokes this time, and they were not great. If you're wondering what I mean, there's a Chihuahua. So picture a lot of family-friendly, racist Mexican jokes, and they're in it. Oh boy. I don't disagree that it feels like a proto-Renaissance film, but it definitely feels like a movie that does not understand what we like about those movies. For the longest time, Oliver and Company was mostly remembered as the movie that was critically and financially far less successful than The Land Before Time. And watching it again, I think it deserves that legacy, and I'm going to say this. I think it deserves more flack than The Black Cauldron gets. The Black Cauldron was right idea, right time, bad execution. Oliver and Company was wrong place, wrong time, wrong execution. Because even though The Little Mermaid following after had very similar ideas of, well, let's be classic Disney again and show everybody why that was great, Oliver and Company feels kind of soulless. It feels like we can just do what we did before and we'll do it fine. And it's like, the last 18 years have been pretty rough for you guys. This is not the time to rest on your laurels. Like, it doesn't feel like a recapture of anything. It just feels bad. Its characters are not fun. The songs, a couple of the songs are good, but they're good in a way where they sound better when you're not watching the movie. Because I like everybody, I do like Why Should I Worry? That's a good song. It works better as a pop song, not attached to the movie. I kind of like Georgette's song, but again, that kind of could work as like a pop song. The other songs in the movie suck. Like, what is it Streets of Gold? No, it's not Streets of Gold. Whatever song that they all sing after they've met Oliver, like 5 minutes after they meet him. I hate that song. It's awful. And oh my god, there's so much clawing at your heartstrings in this movie. It's like, oh, Oliver met a girl who's going to adopt him. He's got to say goodbye to the pack. They've known each other less than 24 hours, maybe less than 12. They don't feel connected at that point. I know my heartstrings aren't going. This kid barely knows these dogs. And this version of Fagin, I can't stand him. He sucks. He's a gambling addict who he treats his dogs well, that's great, but he squanders all of his money, and we're supposed to feel sad about it when the evil loan shark comes to collect the money he does legitimately owe him. And Sykes is a monster, obviously, but you get my point, I think. And at the end of the movie, he doesn't learn his lesson. He then bets on another horse race with the butler, and instead of paying up, it's like, oh, would you look at the time and all the stolen watches? I've got to go. Like, they're just going to create the same problems again later. Sykes dies, spoiler, and that's not a happy end. That's a power vacuum if I've ever seen one. He's just going to fall into the same problems. I don't like this movie a lot. This was my least favorite of all of them. I like The Rescuers more, because at least The Rescuers, I could see where I would appreciate some of it. And I like the opening a lot. I didn't like anything of Oliver and Company. It came so close to half a star. I'm not even joking. And for some people, that's going to be insulting. They're like, what? You don't like this? It's a proto-Disney Renaissance film. And if you feel that way, that's great. I felt it was soulless. I felt it was a clawing, soulless film that tried to pretend we're just like the classic Disney you grew up on. Like, we're doing everything right Disney ever did. And I'm watching and going, this is why you lost to The Land Before Time. This is why they had to make The Little Mermaid. Because this is awful. Well, now we finally get some voiceover instead of footage at the very end of the video. Still recording on the mic that's plugged in to the camera usually. Because looking back at it, it would seem that my USB microphone I've been using for like 10 years has died. So that makes sense. And I'm still not using Audacity, because screw Audacity. I'm going to be quick on some things that aren't video related. The first one is video related. Like if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't, then there's a dislike button that only I see the results of, so you remember that. And subscribe if you're interested for the random schedule that I have. I'm a hobby tuber, not a career tuber, so, you know, subscribing would actually be the only way to find out what's going on, as long as you actually use the subscriptions page, and not just wait for an alert, because that probably won't help you out too much. Use the subscriptions page. The next thing is, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in less than a week from when this video comes out is the US presidential elections, so please do. If you are registered, it's too late to register now unless you live in a state like mine where there is same-day registration, and even still, I would still have made sure to register well in advance, like I did. And look, I don't think I have controversial opinions on my opinion of who I think deserves to win this election, but to keep the comments civil while also being very poignant. There are a lot of voters I know who look at, you know, the candidates and go, well, gee, I feel like really there's no wins here. And I'm just going to say, even when it looks like there is no win for you, and I don't feel that way if I'm being honest, I feel there's a definite win between the two candidates. But if you can look at an election like that, like this, or any, and feel you don't feel that way about either, just remember this. There is a result that, if pulled, you will realize is a loss. And if you do not attempt to stop a loss, you will always carry that with you, that you let that happen. Whether you realize it, or admit it, or not. As for other stuff, remember this is not just presidential, because with the way states work is, there's always states elections, and in fact there's several states where there's local elections happening like every year. For most it's like every 2, because, you know, Senate, Congress, that kind of stuff, but there's plenty where there's local stuff, your local charters. And I, unironically, always go to the stations, even when it's just like a referendum. So please, do your due diligence if you weren't already, and vote every time it's an option. You'd be surprised how many times people not showing up to those actually is worse than anything else you can possibly believe. Entire cities are sometimes lost, basically, because of this kind of thing. Not to be bleak about it, but you have to be bleak about it. At the end of last year, I ended up in a completely different monetary situation than I ever was before. So hey, to reiterate something I put in the middle of the video, yeah, I sell stuff on Ko-fi and itch.io, and I'm planning on removing them from my Squarespace just because I was never able to set up a business PayPal that Squarespace was happy with. I like Squarespace, but that's like the one thing that they're not really accommodating about, to be perfectly honest. So I would appreciate any and all of that. Because I realized this year, I realized I really want to focus on my writing work more than anything else. I like video editing. I like editing pictures together. I don't like doing it as a living. And I really would like to focus on my writing, and I'm trying as hard as I can for getting that kind of thing, which is really, it's easy once you've broken into it, and incredibly hard until you do. And so that means is, if you're kind of wishing that I would upload more, I'm sorry, I am a hobby tuber. I really don't see YouTube as a thing where, I mean, if you're super successful on YouTube, that's great, like, you're set. But boy, you're kind of stuck just being a YouTuber with all that means, and I don't really want to do that outside of just a hobby. That said, I'm not just going to abandon things, although I am definitely reworking things. The way I was doing this series before was I really wouldn't touch a Disney movie until I was going to do like a video for it, and that's silly. Like, there's so many I'd watched previously anyway. So from now on, I'll just watch them whenever I feel like, and I put them in the letterbox listing. And hey, the letterbox, I've even added some lists. I've preemptively added a Marvel ranked list, and preemptively added a Pixar ranked list. The Pixar ranked list even includes the shorts. That way it's manic and crazy. And yes, I said every Marvel film, by the way, so non-MCU things are also on that list. Oh boy. Speaking of wider Disney, you may have noticed there was some park footage at one point. I went to the parks for the first time ever in my life earlier this month. It'll still be October when the video comes out. If you're interested in seeing my footage, I did that on Vimeo, of all things. Maybe I'll also upload it to my other YouTube channel. Probably not, because I did do full 4K. But you know what? It's fun. But here's what I've decided. Next time I do a video that's a marathoning of a Disney era, I want to finish the hat trick of the forgotten eras. That's right, we'll be doing the package features next time. Saludos amigos. Fun and fancy free, all that stuff. Get excited for films you might not even know existed. And yeah, take care, go vote. Like and subscribe, check out my Ko-fi and my Ichios, and just have a pleasant day.
Oh no!